Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rotten Tomatoes is Wrong. I am your host, flying solo this week, Mark Ellis, but I won't be alone for long because I'm about to be joined by sort of my twin. I don't actually have a twin, say, fraternal, somebody I was born with, but there's only so many faces in the world, and me and our guest today both got blessed with the same face. That would, of course, be Topher Grace, who is going to be joining us as we talk about Back to the Future. The entire trilogy is what we're covering today. We're going to go through the classic first one, how we feel about Back to the Future 2 and 3 as well. He's a huge Back to the Future fan, and he's got his new show, Home Economics, which is now entering its next season. He's both the executive producer and one of the stars, so talking to him about that, all of his great movie roles, that 70s show. I mean, he was in everything from Black Klansman to Predators to Spider-Man 3. I mean, the guy's done a lot of stuff. Win a Date with Tad Hamilton. I mean, come on. Topher Grace is here, and I will probably get a chance to ask him if he remembers our fateful meeting for the very first time at a certain restaurant in Hollywood. But very excited to be joined by him. Jacqueline Coley's still out on the road. I believe she's at TIFF right now, the Toronto International Film Festival. So while we look back on some great movies, she is seeing some new great movies. And at the end of the show, if we have time, might very quickly bring in our esteemed engineer, Brian Perez, because he has some hot takes about Back to the Future I'd like his thoughts on. So if we have time, we'll get to that. Back to the Future, you know him, you love him. Marty McFly is just a kid in 1985 when all of a sudden him and his scientist buddy, Doc Brown, accidentally sort of get transported back to 1955. Well, Marty does. Then he meets Doc in 1955, and then he has to get back to 1985. And then in the second one, he goes to 2015, take care of some issues there, gets back to 1955. After going back to an alternate 1985, then we go back to 1885, and then we go all the way back to 1985. There's a lot of time jumping in this movie, courtesy of a semi-nuclear powered DeLorean, and it's just one of those movies that I don't know if you ever can remake it. I don't know that you never should. Get Topher's thoughts on that as well. So all of that and more coming up right now on the podcast, Back to the Future with Topher Grace. But first, we left room for our favorite segment here on the show. Tim Ryan, our review curation manager here at Rotten Tomatoes, is going to tell us what the critics were saying at the time of Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3's release. Now, I didn't run down the tomato meters yet. I'm going to let Tim do that. Tim, I'm hoping that the first one is very, very, very high on the tomato meter. Take it away.
2 minutes with Tim.
It's been more than 30 years since the final entry hit theaters, and there have never been any major attempts at reboots or remakes. So why does the Back to the Future trilogy still resonate so strongly? I think it's that it almost miraculously blends its many seemingly discordant elements into something so light, and at the same time, as Marty McFly would say, so heavy. It's a teen comedy and a sci-fi film, and it's got great characters and endlessly quotable dialogue and incredibly tense action set pieces and hilarious throwaway visual gags and a terrific score. It's also a poignant meditation on family and community through the generations, and in the case of Part 2, the best movie ever made based on the science of time travel, at least according to the legendary scientific polymath Carl Sagan. So let's take a quick look at the 3 entries. Back to the Future from 1985 is certified fresh at 97% on the tomato meter with 86 reviews, and it has a 94% audience score. Back to the Future Part 2 from 1989 is fresh at 63%, and it has an 85% audience score. Back to the Future Part 3 from 1990 is certified fresh at 80% with 46 reviews, and it has a 78% audience score. So what did the critics have to say? In a fresh review of the original, Joseph Gelmus of Newsday wrote, "Back to the Future is the best comic strip movie I've seen this year. It's well-made, lighthearted, and is exactly the right length to give you excitement and laughs and a few surprises. And then it's over, leaving you feeling good." However, in a rotten review for Back to the Future Part 2, Jonathan Rosenbaum of the Chicago Reader wrote, "By the end, you may feel that you've just sat through a feature-length commercial for both Part 1, which has to be seen to make this sequel comprehensible, and Part 3, a trailer for it literally ends Part 2. So that's the Back to the Future trilogy. Let's kick it back to Mark. I'm going to make like a tree and get out of here.
There's Tim Ryan, and without further ado, let's get into some movie talk. Back to the Future trilogy with Topher Grace. And now, as promised, welcoming to the show for the very first time, Mr. Topher Grace, the executive producer and star of Home Economics. You also know him from award-winning movies, blockbusters, sitcoms, anything and everything on stage, on screen, and his podcast, Minor Adventures with Topher Grace. Welcome, sir. I apologize if it feels like you're looking in a mirror.
Well, that only means that you're a very good-looking man.
This was the weirdest interaction that I had because it was also so pleasant. This was, you will not remember this, about 10 years ago. I was with some friends at a Chipotle in Hollywood, and you were right in front of me. And I never met you.
Already, just what you said means you probably bumped into me. Yeah.
We ordered the exact same burrito, Topher. I wasn't trying to copy you. We got
we looked at each other and did like a mirror exercise.
I was nervous to shake your hand because you were very gracious. I said that, hey, a lot of my fans say I look like you. Is it cool we take a picture? You were very, very nice. And I was concerned when we actually shook hands that it was going to be like Time Cop, where the space-time continuum just turns the matter inside of itself. Luckily, that's not the time travel reality.
Well, it's funny you get that, but I get Brad Pitt a lot. And it's like, it's been detrimental in my career because it's like, I'm my own actor. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm only getting roles that he passed on, and you go, when do I get to become my own person?
The hell that is our life. I think we would have looked great on that roof, fixing that antenna in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So maybe the next time.
Yeah, it was either him or me or you. It's like interchangeable.
Something that is not interchangeable, that is just a part of really Americana and really beloved worldwide, is the Back to the Future trilogy of movies. And I will say particularly the first one, and I don't want to be a naysayer towards the sequels. They're very fun movies, but we're here to talk about the entire trilogy. So I'm just going to run down the tomato meter score with you, and I just want to get your take as to whether Rotten Tomatoes is wrong with any of these. So Back to the Future from 1985, the classic, 97% certified fresh, 94% audience score.
I'll tell you, that is off by about 3%. I mean, I don't think any, and that's always, like I remember going back and reading the Time magazine review of Star Wars, which was like terrible. And then they had to retract it and literally print an article saying we were wrong. Like just the reviewer was having an off day or didn't get it or something. But I think there's no one that's from 1985, those reviews you're talking about, right?
That's from 1985 until now, because you can really look at it like, okay, this is a lot of movie reviewers at the time, but then a lot of newer movie reviewers that are on the tomato meter go back and look at these movies. I have a feeling that anything that is not 100% or nothing that
is from 1985, right? Yeah,
that's got to be in 1985. I don't want to say crotchety. I don't want to demographic, say who it was, but it just felt like maybe it like the movie says itself. If you don't like it, your kids are going to love it.
That's right. That's right. I think I can understand how someone older at the time might have thought that because it was really made for kids, for teens. But I remember seeing it. My experience with that film is seeing it. One of the first movies I remember seeing with my parents. Like everyone seemed excited to see it, and my sister, right? So that was a wide swath of people of different ages. And I remember us all enjoying, like going, oh man, this is crazy that I'm, 8 or 9 or something. And my dad is 40 something and we're both enjoying it. Like that's very rare. Truly enjoying something.
That's fascinating. So you actually did get to see the movie in a theater when it came out, and you remember that experience?
Yeah. I was just old enough that I remember I was like, with a babysitter, and my dad came home and was talking to the babysitter. Like everyone says this movie's, it was the first blockbuster I was aware of people were talking about. And then when I saw it, look, this is not a unique situation. Anyone listening who's my age probably had this experience, but immediately I had to buy a skateboard. It was like that scene with the skateboard at the beginning and immediately we had to buy like an LP of that Huey Lewis song.
I was the same way, albeit I guess I was a little younger because I didn't see the first movie in the theater. I think this was the rare movie where my parents broke down and they're like, look, everybody's talking about this. We're going to get a babysitter for the 3 kids and we're going to go see if it's okay. And they came back and they told us about it. And so then the next year when it was available to tape on VHS, it was that and Teen Wolf were constantly played at my house.
Yeah, Michael J. Fox had a big year in 1985. Big year.
Those were my sports. I was like, okay, well, I need to learn how to skateboard and I need to learn how to play basketball. And if I get to turn into a werewolf on top of it.
And you need to learn how to do flips on top of your van.
We did do. We don't try it at home, kids. Is all I'm going to say. What you see in Teen
I
Wolf,
have
leave
a
it to the
friend who
movie.
says about movies, who's in the business out here. He says all movies are allowed one thing. So like a kid becoming a wolf, you go, okay, that's the premise. But when he starts breakdancing, you're like, this is unrealistic.
Yeah, it's like it's the Indiana Jones fridge bomb. It's like I'll let that happen, but the rest of the movie better be realistic.
The fridge. Oh yeah, you're right. I was like a judge when I saw. You're talking about the Crystal Skull.
The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Yeah.
When I saw that opening, I was like a judge who's like, I'll allow it, but I want to see where this is going.
You better be going somewhere with this counselor.
Yeah, you better be going somewhere with this attorney, whatever.
Yeah, it was just a transcendental movie, and then you had the two follow-ups that were pioneering movie technology as far as visual effects and also how to make movies being shot back to back. That was Back to the Future 2 from '89, which is 63% fresh on the tomato meter, and then Back to the Future 3 gets back up to 80% certified fresh. The interesting thing about those two movies is that Back to the Future 2 actually has the higher audience score, which is 85%.
Yeah, I was going to say,
3,
I think if you ask
78.
most people, they'd say the films go in order of how good they are.
Is that how you feel about it? Because I go 1, and then I go 3, and then I go 2.
I actually don't disagree with you, but I think the most people I've talked to don't like 3. I kind of thought 3 was charming, and 2 is like a little challenging. But look, the first movie alone is probably the most perfect film ever made. It's just so like there's not one line that doesn't connect to another line, except when he's pouring. I mean, I'm going to geek out real hard at this.
Please do.
Here. When he pours those chips, he pours that peanut brittle.
Yeah.
That's the only, I remember back, even when I saw it the first time, being like, why did they do like a hard cut to him pouring peanut brittle? Did you know what I'm talking about? So George McFly
It's at dinner, yeah.
Is at dinner, and out of nowhere, there's a hard cut, and he's just like going to town on this peanut brittle. And it's because there's a scene they were right to cut after Biff leaves. Someone shows up selling the equivalent of like Girl Scout cookies, but it's peanut brittle. And she's like, do you want peanut brittle? And the dad just says to the Girl Scout, like, yeah, just sign him up for like 20 boxes, right, George? Like, it just shows how much he's like being pushed around. And that's, to me, the only thing that's imperfect about the movie is that they cut out. I never understood why he was going to town on that peanut brittle. But
I always thought, as a kid, it was just like this weird cereal that adults eat. And then you come to realize, no, that's peanut brittle that George McFly is eating. But it's also, that scene itself is such a great intro into the family dynamic, just how boring they are. And how...
As a kid, though, you're accepting films, especially at that age when we probably saw it, you're accepting films on a dreamlike level. So you're not asking questions. But I grew up, I thought this script, I mean, there's literally not one line that doesn't connect to a thing that pays off, except for that peanut brittle thing, which was probably the right cut to make. I heard a DVD commentary thing with Zemeckis talking about testing this film, which is just the greatest story ever, which is like, if everyone who went to see this film, our parents included, had watched all the ads and understood the conceit of the movie. But when you test a movie, they don't tell you the conceit. I mean, I've been to film tests, as both an actor and beforehand when I was in college. I went to the Truman Show, weirdly. And I had no idea what the Truman Show, I knew it was a film starring Jim Carrey. And then you start watching it and it kind of explains itself at the beginning, like, oh, Truman is in a community and he's being filmed. But Back to the Future, if you haven't seen an ad for it, is a very weird first 20 minutes.
It's a strange movie, particularly if you only really know, if your entry point, if you're in that test audience, you probably knew Michael J. Fox from Family Ties and you enjoyed him as Alex P. Keaton. But seeing this time travel movie, it's like, what the hell is this movie?
Well, you don't even know it's about time travel. First, it's this kid is like playing guitar. Then he's in school. Then his family's doing like an info dump of like how they met, which you don't really care about. Then a mad scientist has a time machine. I mean, it's like, what they said about, I mean, I think it's one of the highest rated tested films of all time. Like, it's just such a crowd pleaser. But apparently, like, there were a couple walkouts at the beginning because no one understood where it was going or it's so meandering at the beginning. And apparently when they're both putting their hand on the back of their head, him and his dad, and they look, the guy says McFly and they look up together, the whole audience in unison went, oh, like they understood the thing that the ads would tell you.
McFly? What do you think you're doing?
Biff.
Hey, I'm talking to you, McFly, you Irish bug.
Oh, hey, Biff. Hey, guys. How are you doing?
Yeah, you got my homework finished, McFly?
You know what I mean? Which was that what the whole thing was. And then it became like everyone stayed. But the fact that a couple people walked out, I'm like, yeah, I get it. You're kind of like, what is this film about if you don't know the other great story is his editor, Artie Schmidt, who's just one of the great editors. Zemeckis was going to cut out the Johnny Be Good scene.
Travesty.
And they said the editor, which is a great editor, just said, why don't we just leave it in for the first test screening? See what it looks like in front of an audience.
Because he had to know what they had there. Because I was going to ask you, what is your favorite scene in Back to the Future? I mean, you take this perfect movie and you just condense it into, this is the scene that really lights it up for me. For me, it's the Johnny Be Good scene that's still... I had the pleasure of doing a Q&A and like introducing the movie a few years ago. And then it like, you know, sometimes you'll do a job and then you're like, all right, what's the rest of my night? Who are you doing
a Q&A with?
It was a Q&A at a company I used to work for called Collider, and so we didn't have any of the we didn't have any of the cast and crew. We just had like
it was like doing an interview with me about a movie that I
wasn't. It
was
literally nobody affiliated with the film whatsoever. And here's how great Back to the Future is. It was still a packed house. Right. They knew that they weren't they knew that I was the most famous person there, but they still were like, no, we want to go see Back to the Future.
On the big screen, yeah.
And then when the Johnny Be Good scene happens, which I guess, you know, usually on the show, I want to give you some context. If you haven't seen Back to the Future, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, just stop listening immediately and go watch that movie with your time. Right?
If you like Peanut Brittle, this is the movie for you. That's how we'll sell it if you haven't seen it.
Also, if you probably don't listen to the rest of the podcast if you've never seen it. But I think that's just an example of it. Growing up, the more you watch it, the more you learn about structure and what should pay off. But what's so interesting about the Johnny Be Good scene is Zemeckis was right. Like, it actually has nothing to do with the plot and you don't need it. And I try to remember that. Even it's so funny. We were editing an episode of Home Economics, and the best moments of anything, I mean, this is only a 22-minute long thing, but the best moments of anything are when it kind of leaves the ground for a second and you do something that doesn't necessarily have a payoff. Like, the thing in itself is a payoff, or it's just kind of like encapsulating the feeling of we've gotten better at that as we've gone along, where we go, like our premiere episode, we go to Disneyland, and just beforehand, it's not in the script, but like, how much can we film? There's a moment where my brother and I go off and ride the rides, and it can't really be scripted. You know, it's just kind of like they go on rides and have fun. There were a couple jokes that we scripted in like a montage. But I thought, how much footage can we get of that? You know what I mean? That feeling that you're at when you're at Disneyland, and not to compare it at all to Back to the Future or the Johnny Be Good scene, but the best stuff is when the music kicks in. I mean, every movie that you love probably has a moment that could be cut out, but is actually the best moment. And just, you can't describe why. Maybe there's not even any dialogue, you know?
With Back to the Future, I'm going to cry foul. I'm going to say that it does have something to do with the plot. And I'll put my finger in Zemeckis' face and say that the beauty of that scene is that this is Marty because I mean, the movie it's also about Marty's journey and whether he wants to be, or whether he can pull off being a musician, whether he believes in himself enough. Because the beginning of the movie, he's auditioning to play at a school dance.
No, I love that. I think Marty is such an interesting character, and he's like so indicative of the 80s, which is he's not even the star of the film. He's just a cool guy. Like, they tacked on this thing. There's like one or two scenes where he gets rejected from, like, you know, playing at a dance. But truly, the protagonist of the film is George. It's like he's got this, you know, he's got to overcome his obstacles and ask the girl out and beat up the guy. And like, his son's just the coolest dude from 1985 who knows skateboard tricks. And I mean, I'm not, besides kind of like playing that song, Marty has almost no growth during the film. but I mean, that's what's so cool about the 80s, that there were characters that were just cool.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like, if Marty's left to his own devices, he's never getting out of 1955 if he goes back there. But it really is Doc Brown pushing him the whole time. Like, you need to do this. You need to be here at this point. You need to do this. And then that's how you're going to get back to your time.
Yeah, and then he's trying to push the dad to grow. And at the end, the dad's had this huge growth. And I would say, if the tomato meter is correct, the second and third ones really kind of suffer from not having the protagonist from the first one in it. And can I just add, I'm dying to put this in a film. I'm not going to do any action films, so I don't know how this would work, but I want to do a scene where I'm like jumping out of a plane or something. And right beforehand, instead of saying like, see on the ground or, whatever the cool line is, I want to say, all right, listen, it's a blues riff and B, watch me for changes and try to keep up, and then jump out of the plane.
I was going to say, was that not like a cut scene from Predators where like you wake up or you're,
they didn't want any Back to the Future references in Predators, I guess. That's
a bummer, because Predators, just on a different note, I will say, as good as any other Predator movie in the franchise, fresh on the tomato meter.
I know. Prey is pretty great.
Prey's pretty sweet.
Dan Trachtenberg friend, and he just crushed it with that film. I loved it.
Yeah, really. Getting back to the Future, what's another scene that's not the Johnny B. Good scene where, again, the hair stands up on my arms when it comes on. I love it so very much. The other one for me would be the first time we go back in time. We're at Twin Pines Mall, and it's an adventure scene, and it's just Marty. And when he shifts and he escapes the van, and he says, "Let's see if you bastards can do 90." It just, that to me, we're watching a gear shift happen in the movie. That's also when the movie itself takes this metaphorical gear shift that just gets us to the next level in terms of excitement, in terms of, wow, what a ride we're on.
Let's see if you bastards can do 90.
The other thing I've heard when Zemeckis talks about it is there are very few visual effects in the first one. The second one takes more advantage of, Robert Zemeckis' amazing ability to work with. I think it's the first one he worked with computer effects, which has become like his thing, right?
Yeah.
But like that first one, it's really the story that's the effect, or it's the changing of sets, and you're looking at the same town square, but it looks different. There's really like 2 special effects shots, or maybe 3. I guess there's the hand, when he's playing guitar, and there's the car twice. To me, it's like the tension in that film. I love that the scene you're talking about obviously is unbelievable, but the last scene when I remember seeing it's like maybe my 15th time seeing the film, and your heart is in your throat. Like, is the thing going to connect with the lightning and the plug? And it's like each time that he has a solution, and then there's another bigger problem. And then when it all works, it's like, I think the original beginning of the end of the film was he had to fly into a nuclear bomb that was going off in the desert. That was like, and I think it's because of budgetary stuff that they had to like scrap it. But I think it forced them to do something that was more, probably less effects driven, but more actually tension driven, which is put it in that square at Universal. And it's just like oh my God, that's just such a perfect scene. And that, oh my God, I can't talk about it without just geeking out. I just love it so much.
No,
it's also like the performance. If you look at it from an actor's point of view, like it's bananas. Everyone's doing like kabuki theater. It's way, like if I walked, I get like why Eric Stoltz was fired. He's probably doing a pretty normal, good job. But like everyone's like, at the very least, everyone's doing sitcom acting. It's like the guy from Taxi, the guy from Family Ties. It's like what George is doing. It's like, it's so, the genius of it is the conductor has them all doing it at the same level. You know what I mean? Like everyone's over the top at the exact same level. It's probably why Eric Stoltz didn't work out. When I look at it, I go, I think I learned more about timing for that 70s show or for any sitcom from watching that movie, because they literally pause for like audience laughs. You would never in real life say, "Listen, Daddy-o." Like if you're trying to like hide the fact that you're saying dad, you wouldn't like say it out loud. But everything's like it's all at the same level. It's brilliant.
That's why we got to show her that you, George McFly, are a fighter. You're somebody who's going to stand up for yourself, somebody who's going to protect her. Yeah, but I've never picked a fight in my entire life. Look, you're not going to be picking a fight, Dad. Daddy-o. You're coming to a rescue, right?
The line that I quote myself, that I quote back to myself the most, just like when I'm talking to nobody else in particular, I just love saying the line, Jesus, George, it's a wonder I was even born. Just
Yeah,
the fact
why
that
would you say that out loud? It's
to your dad, you're about to give it away, man.
And then the dad's like, what? He's like, nothing. You know what's great if you want a real treat is type in YouTube Crispin Glover Family Ties, because 2 years before he was on Family Ties.
What?
And here's the thing about Crispin Glover, because you've heard so much, there's so much drama about him on the film and why they didn't want to have him in the sequels and stuff. But he's hilarious in Back to the Future. I mean, he's amazing. And if you watch him on Family Ties, he's like stealing the scenes from Michael J. Fox. He's great. I mean, he's great. It's like this episode where they're at a strip club or something, but like he's just crushing lines, and he's coming from Neptune. You would never make the choices he makes, and it's so funny.
It's a credit to his ability as an actor, and I guess his range as an actor, because, you talk about watching this movie as a kid and certain things you don't notice, particularly about a performance, is how versatile he is, going from the guy that we meet in 1985 to being a 30-year younger version of that same guy and pulling it off, and then coming back to 1985 and being the polar opposite of who he originally was.
That's right, yeah.
I love how cool he is.
It's all
hilarious.
believable, too. And Leah Thompson's amazing. They don't get focused on enough how great they are in that movie. And
the villain, the villain presence of Biff Tannen.
Yeah, man. He's got to be like top 5 villains of all time, right?
He is. I mean, because you talk about this movie and you look at how Biff wants to be with Lorraine and how problematic that might have been in retrospect with any other movie. But this is one of those where it just never really enters my headspace in the same way that the time travel mechanism itself. None of this matters that it's realistic or not, because you're having such a good time from start to finish with this movie that it doesn't matter if it checks all the scientific boxes. And with Biff, Biff is so funny, and he's in 1985. He's the bully, and it's another one of my favorite lines is, Jesus, I paid to have your car towed all the way to your house. And you got for me to
No, that's like, I didn't get that when I was a kid. And as an adult, when you watch it, you go, what a brilliant line. He's having such a blast with that role. It's like, I have it sometimes on Home Economics when we're here. I got to be a producer on it, which is my first time producing a TV show. So, and the only reason I really wanted to do that was to have a say in the cast. Because, unlike a movie, this goes on and on and on. We're entering our 3rd year of doing it. And I've been on a TV show like that before. And I've been with a real kind of dream team. And I thought, I just want to be part of helping choose those people, because you wind up spending a big chunk of your life with them. I mean, you need them to be good as actors, but I really wanted to be people that I was all like crazy a fan of. I would say the same thing's true about all great ensembles. Like, everyone's crushing it. But I'm looking at the poster here. We're all like, I feel the same way when I'm watching movies I love. You just want to, sometimes I miss my lines on Home Economics, because I'm sitting here going like, you're like watching their performance and saying like, yes, oh, that's going to cut together so great.
Line.
Yeah, no, I forget it's me. I'm just kind of, okay, there's been a long pause. It's probably my turn now.
You make such an interesting point about the Back to the Future films. And I would say this for the whole trilogy, is that Marty McFly is the cool one, but it's, even though the 2 and 3 become more about his story, it's so crucial to have that surrounding cast you're talking about, particularly Christopher Lloyd as Doc and Thomas F. Wilson as Biff back in the old days in 2015. I mean, Back to the Future 2 comes out, and Topher, I still look at that movie as like the gold standard for what the future could have been, because every movie we see now with the future, it's dark, it's depressing, there's no water left. Yeah. Back to the Future 2 it came out in 89 or 9, and I saw that in the theater. That was one of my first theater experiences. Wow. And 2015 was still far enough away to be like, this could actually happen. This is exciting.
Well, I think I look at it now and I realize, I think they're kind of trying to do the 50s in the future. Like, they kind of, color-wise, they did something really great with the first one. I heard that all the paint on the buildings was actually colors from cars at the time. It wasn't actually the 50s. It was like, this is Rick Carter, I think. Who's like a great production designer, came up with that idea of like giving it this sheen that, I mean, at the time, it's so sad. At the time when I saw it, we were closer to 1955 than we are now to 1985. But like, I mean, my parents
hurts.
they were watching the film going, oh, that's when I grew up. But it was this, Mr. Sandman, like, idealized version of the 50s. And the colors were, popped more, and it was kind of a little cleaner. It was, I don't know, America's idea of what the 50s were. And then I think the future was kind of a version of that. I think I heard Bob Gale say once that it was like just do gags, like because you can't really say, you can comment on the past, but they were just trying to kind of do, fun gags, like instead of people coming out to wash your car, a robot comes out and wash it, or just, funny future gags. But I think
the Jaws, the shark in 3D, or the USA Today, the newspaper, stuff like that. What was really appetizing to me, who was on the side of chubby as a kid, is the tiny little Pizza Hut that you put in the oven and then it just makes a huge. I was like, is that really the future's going to be great?
Yeah, well, it felt kind of like a soda pop fountain shop version of the future, which no one does. You're right.
The weirdest scene to me, and I think you'd probably agree, is just when we go to the McFly's home, because we didn't have Crispin Glover back for this one. There was a dispute amongst the contractor, the salary, and so we don't get him. And so it's just, it's a little odd. I thought that Robert Zemeckis handled it brilliantly as far as making a movie and having to go around as crucial of a piece of the original Back to the Future as George McFly was. To be able to get around that as well as he did, I thought is just a testament to him as a filmmaker. And then we spend the rest of the movie going back to 1955 and just sort of looking at the original events through a funhouse mirror. And I love that, knowing that we get Back to the Future 3. I think that Back to the Future 3 made that scene better, because without Back to the Future 3, then Back to the Future 2, the whole thing just becomes sort of an exercise in redundancy, right?
Yeah, when I saw Back to the Future 2, they had during the credits, a ad for Back to the Future 3.
Right, I remember that.
And I think that is important because it's kind of, I guess, I mean, it was supposed to be one movie and they kind of split it into two. And when you watch it, you kind of go, I think it actually is just one. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and they both,
that's fair.
Back to the Future 3 is missing, is probably in Back to the Future 2 and vice versa. And look, I loved, it's so hard to make a sequel. It's so hard to keep a world alive, and they really did it. But I guess, yeah, I wish they'd, from everything you just said, I wish they worked out their salary thing with Crispin Glover, just because I think that's the story you're really actually kind of watching, and they had to figure something else out, I guess.
I love that Old West stuff, though. I mean, the Old West is, and it becomes more of Doc Brown's story than anybody else. I mean, we want Marty to get back to his normal time period, but just seeing Doc in an actual relationship and like seeing Doc to be happy, it throws your mind for a loop, but it also adds another layer to the character where he's not just this mad scientist who has all these weird contraptions from time travel to dog food machines. He actually does have a heart, and I think that he earned getting to fall in love with someone to the level of a Mary Steenburgen, because he worked hard for this. He had to go to multiple time periods, but he finally did it. But here's the question. Does it make sense for a man of science like Doc to actually skew the future like that and fall in love with somebody from the Old West?
Well, she was going to die.
Kids?
She was dead. That's the only reason it's okay.
She was
no,
dead.
In the past, she went off the cliff and died. So she's like a free agent now.
I guess so. I mean,
you can't do it with someone who was going to live.
No, because that would have, the whole space-time continuum thing, it makes me nervous. But again, it doesn't really factor into particularly the first Back to the Future, because it's such a fun ride. And then the other two, I think more than anything for me, it's just getting to go back to that universe where even if it doesn't live up to the legacy of the first movie, just getting to spend more time in that world is always a treat. So if they're on TV, I'll find myself watching them to conclusion, just because I just love this world so much.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I like the swings they took. I mean, I heard Zemeckis say once they were going to make it either way. So it was either they were going to make it or someone else was going to make it. And I'm glad they made it. But that first film in its construction is so perfect. It probably shouldn't have had a sequel. Like, it's just, you can't, I don't think anyone could make a sequel that's better or even as good. It's just, it's like telling a perfect joke or something. Like, everything connects to everything else. And then at the end, they got this great gag where they go to the future, but you don't see it. I mean, it's just like such a perfect movie. And my hat's off to them for trying. And I loved it, going back into that world and spending time with those characters. But I'll never make something that great. But if I did, I hope I stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you hope you could just kind of, put the brakes on when you need to, because the end of the first movie, which is another fun fact that I'm sure you're already aware of, is that in the theatrical release version that Topher got to see when he was a kid, it did not have like the DeLorean takes off and goes into the future. Where we're going, we don't need roads, and they shoot out.
It was just everyone like laughed in the audience, and then it went into the credits, and then when it came out on VHS, it said to be continued.
They added the to be continued, which was so exciting for me the first time I saw it. It was like, oh my God, we get more of this, but it's such a perfect way to end. Like you said, if you don't have the sequels, if you just had that movie, it just lets us all use our imagination. So I think I know the answer to this question as I'm asking it, but is there any way that you could ever reboot or remake Back to the Future? Or is it just one of those movies that we leave from 1985 in the Smithsonian for all time? It cannot be touched.
Well, I would totally say don't touch it, but I think Zemeckis got the rights by doing the second two. The reason we haven't seen 4, 5, 6, and 7 is because Zemeckis and Bob Gale can control whether that happens or not, and then it's probably up to their kids when they go whether it happens. Man, it's so funny. The way you're talking about just the sequels to the first one is kind of a metaphor for how Hollywood is with IP or intellectual property, which is that people just want to see the car. Like they just, anything that can look, and this is coming from someone who just did an episode of that 90s show on Netflix, like everyone wants to be a part of something or the Star Wars movies keep rebooting. There's like everyone wants to go back in the Millennium Falcon, or everyone wants to, I get it. I want to go back, but I think what you really want to do is see the original movie again. Like, you know what I mean? Like truly you should go back and watch that first Star Wars trilogy or whatever. But what I like doing sometimes is just watching the trailer for a sequel.
Yes.
Like what I would love to do if I could control what my kids watch, which I won't be able to do, I would say like, watch Spider-Man 1 and 2 and watch the trailer for Spider-Man 3 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like just because the trailer is the real dream of what it could be. And then it's very hard / maybe impossible when something's so good to I remember watching Iron Man 1 and being like, this is like a perfect movie. And watching the trailer for Iron Man 2 and being like, oh, here we go. And I'll tell you the best one ever was Crystal Skull.
That's a good one.
Yep. I mean, I still go back and watch that trailer from the late 2000s as the great trailer moment of my life.
Love that I get to geek out about trailers with you for a sec here too, because, and it does pertain to the Back to the Future conversation.
Oh yeah, dude, you're talking about teasers right now.
I mean, 2 and 3 were filmed back to back, and like Topher said, maybe it could have been one movie. It could have been split into two. But seeing that trailer was, first of all, it was a bold step forward in movie making.
The first movie has the greatest teaser of all time. That wasn't even in the film, where he's just walking up to the.
Yeah.
Okay, but the second one, when he goes, it's like they're showing shots of the first one. Oh my God, it's so great! And then he goes, "Are we back?" We're back. Like, I mean, you just want to be part of something where, gosh, you're in a trailer like that. It's just, oh my God. And the posters, you remember the poster said, it's about time. What a great.
Yes.
Because it had been such a long time. They took a real break in between the two. Also, it's like the same day, but Marty's like, 6 years older.
Yeah, it's just so funny to look back on that and like look at the excitement of that, because I still today, like if I'm on the road and I'm bored, I'm more often than not after the shows, I'll put on like the Star Wars trailers and just watch those, because it reminds me how excited I was to see.
Which ones are you talking about? Because The Force Awakens has some of the greatest trailers ever made.
The Force Awakens trailer made me literally cry when I was at that Star Wars Celebration in 2015.
Right, we have in the premiere next week, we go to Disneyland, but in it we see, I mean, there's like a deep cut trailer nerd joke but we like, my brother reveals the Millennium Falcon to me. And by the way, it was filming there. It it's amazing production value. Like it's very hard to, even though we're at ABC, it was very hard to get into the park, and you get Lucasfilm to sign off on it.
Right,
Marvel stuff. We had Marvel to sign off on, but like he reveals it to me and I go, Chewie, we're home. And I'm like, I don't know who's going to get this, but to me, that moment when Harrison Ford said that, those trailers are amazing. I'm going to go best trailers, dude. Let's just abandon the Back to the Future thing. And I'm going to do best trailers of all time.
This is why we're here.
I want to do it with you. You go first. Like literally your favorite 5 trailers.
The best trailer. And I'm not saying this just because you're the guest and you have some history with a certain edit of this film. I still go back to the first teaser trailer, and I'll put you in the room where I was, Topher. I was
watching The Siege.
I was a freshman. Because
I bought a ticket to The Siege just to watch the Phantom Menace trailer.
After I saw this on my roommate's computer at the time, there was some pirated
the beginning
version
of the internet,
it.
right? Yeah.
Because I was like out drinking with my buddies in another room. My roommate comes to get me. He knows what a big Star Wars nerd I am by this time. And he's like, dude, you got to come check this out. And I'm looking at his computer screen on his laptop, and it's not full screen. We don't know how to do that yet. It's just a tiny little bar, but he plays it. And I see the Lucasfilm logo and I hear cheers. And I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, no. And then, every myth has every journey has a first step. And then you hear the Darth Vader breath. And I'm like, good God. And then I rush out and I buy a ticket to meet Joe Black, is the movie I went to go see.
I saw The Siege and didn't even stay to watch The Siege.
I took off I did not meet Joe Black that night. I bought a ticket. I did not.
I remember everyone, this was like in Westwood when I went to see it. Everyone's waving their lightsabers, and then the Lucasfilm thing is up and everyone gets dead silent. Like zero cheers. Like people are just like trying to ingest it. It's great. Okay, so that's great. That's one. Keep going. What else?
All right. This one is a movie that maybe most people don't remember, but I'm telling you, the trailer was great thanks to legendary rock band The Who. There's a movie starring John Leguizamo called Summer of Sam. And the movie itself, go watch the Summer of Sam trailer. It's great. The movie trailer is one of the best trailers
I got to go
I've
check out that
seen.
trailer. Wow, great call, man. That's a real... That's a deep cut, yeah.
So I went easy front of the shelf, and then I went back to the stock room. What is
okay? Let me give it a shot.
For Topher Grace?
Front shelf, I'm gonna put all Spielberg teasers. So like, he always does. He's the only one who's balls to do like zero footage from the movie. So it's like, Jaws is great, where they're swimming around and that voice is talking to you.
Yeah.
E.T. and Close Encounters have one, but they're a little generic. Jurassic Park has an amazing one where this guy's just going deep into a mine and he finds the bug in amber and he's looking at it and it goes all the way into the bug's eye. It's like incredible. And Hook actually has a cool one too. So I love all those ones because they just had the balls not to show any of the actual footage from the movie. Ghostbusters 2 has clearly they'd given them stock in the film or something. They give them because like they have a scene that could only really be for the trailer, but it's in the movie where
That's
he
hysterical.
goes, oh man, I forget what the setup is, but it's Bill Murray going, the one, the only, Ghostbusters, and Dan Aykroyd goes back, and you're like, well, I don't know why you'd have that in a movie, but it goes into the Ghostbusters theme, and it's unbelievable.
Ghostbusters 2, by the way, sort of the same, DNA as Back to the Future 2 and 3, where I really like that movie. There's a lot to take out of Ghostbusters. I know what you're saying.
It's like a kind of a retread, but also really great. And they have the same cast. All right, so my back shelf one, I don't know how back shelf this is, but Stranger Things season 2. So Stranger Things was a big hit. Mm-hmm. And then the season 2 one has a teaser cut to Thriller, and it's so well thought out, and it's about Halloween, but it's Thriller and it's the 80s and they're the Ghostbusters. It's like, if you want to get hyped, go. Oh, you know what? I'll tell you the best trailer I've probably ever seen was this Marvel Celebrate the Movies trailer that came out in the middle of the pandemic. Do you remember this?
The Marvel Celebrate the Movies.
It wasn't about one movie. It was like, here are all the movies coming out the next year or something.
Oh, yeah.
And they had someone, it's, by the way, same composer as Back to the Future, Alan
Silvestri, yeah.
And they did like some hyped up version of it. And they're just showing film after film. And I was like, I got to like close my computer. Like I just got way too hyped. Like it's so good.
Especially during the pandemic. Like I watched so many trailers and I got hyped. Then I'm like, well, I'm still just being the dog here, you know? But I'm glad you actually brought up Silvestri too, because you can't really talk about Back to the Future without getting into how great that musical score is. I mean, I think it's probably the best. I put it up there with the best of John Williams, and I put John Williams as the greatest movie composer of all time. So the adventure.
You're right. There's really not a lot going on in Back to the Future. That's what makes the score so amazing. That it's it kind of takes place in a couple different rooms in this town square. It's not like the desert, or some the ocean or something.
But we're racing, and that makes it, the music that kicks in when he's driving the car, when he's driving the DeLorean, makes it feel like we're going even faster than we already are. And the great scene that is particularly touching to my Van Halen loving heart is the Darth Vader scene, where he puts the tape that says Edward Van Halen. They had to write Edward because Van Halen, the band, didn't sign off on it. It was just Eddie. So they had to write Edward. And that actually is Eddie Van Halen playing guitar in that scene. It's not a Van Halen song. It's an outtake because he was doing the soundtrack for The Wildlife. And so it's an outtake that didn't make it on that soundtrack.
Oh, is that true? It wasn't for Back to the Future. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, the thing, I watched the deleted scenes when they all came out in that, I think it was like somewhere around 2000, they put them all out and it was incredible. Like I'd never seen him. Was he chloroforms him at the end and they cut that part. That's why, because I was always like, how did he get out of that room? And he chloroforms him. And it wasn't very cinematic or great to watch and a little bit questionable. And that's why George starts off the next scene saying, I slept late. I slept late anyway. And he's like, all right, get your stuff together.
Yeah. Darth Vader said he was going to come down from planet Vulcan and melt my brain. Just another day in 1955. Well, I do want to get into some home economics talk too, because this show, I know it's been a passion project, like you already talked about, getting to produce it now and getting to have a say in the cast. I mean, what do you do with this season that you're excited about that maybe you didn't get a chance to do with the previous episodes?
We have some cool plot stuff. We have a flashback episode. So we did a little time travel. We go to, it's funny. It takes place in 2009, which I was like, wasn't that like 2 weeks ago? But, Jimmy, who's my younger brother on it, is, just turned 30. And so 2009 for him was like high school. And it's great when you start to, like, everyone's living, like, we're wearing Live Strong bracelets and, someone's got like a Team Edward shirt on. And like, it was interesting to do a time period thing about that. It's about how we all met and all that stuff. But there's stuff like that. We find out we have a new sibling, which is, the whole show's about us as siblings. And in a really funny, cool way, we find out we have another sibling, which is big for us. But truly, the plot isn't what you get excited about as you go. Of the cast, I'm the one who's been on a show before and on the list too. But like, what happens is you get into season 3 and 4, which is when 70s shows started working, when a lot of sitcoms started to kind of click in, is there's like an idea of what the show can be, and you're casting to that, and the writers are writing to it. But then you all spend a lot of time together, and the writing gets better for the characters, and the actors get better to the writing, and the editing gets tighter, and just everyone starts to know what it is. And actually, it's just fantastic. It's just better. I don't know how to describe. Like, I wouldn't, if someone said walk me through 70 show seasons, I wouldn't be like, well, this season, this plot thing happened. That's what made it better. It's just that everyone gets better and more of like a tighter team unit. And it's great to be on something long enough to watch that happen, because it just gets what people remember of sitcoms, I think, is the middle of their run. Like, you can then apply it to the first, I remember loving Friends, the first season it started, but really what I loved was the middle of Friends. Then you kind of, when you're watching reruns, you apply it to the beginning.
That's an interesting point, is because I'm rewatching Cheers right now, because it's Cheers and it's great. And the first season is so great, but it's also clearly sort of the setup for all of the greatness that is to come. And then by the end of a show's run, it's sort of like, you don't want to make the goodbye too long. And so it really is the middle, the meat in the sandwich that is the best stuff in a sitcom.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of like this with these superhero movies, where the first one, you have to learn how the person got their powers and what was the situation. And the second one's the one where you're like, well, we can just like rock and roll now. Like, you don't have to like set a lot of stuff up. You can just have fun, front to back. And I think that's what it feels like here. Just each episode, I don't know. I obviously I love editing so much and getting things as tight as possible, and it just feels so good. I love the cast so much, and I love doing the job, but I also love watching it too. I guess I'm getting high on my own supply.
Yeah, but I mean, you look at your career and you go all the way back to that 70s show, and it feels like yesterday probably to you and me, but it was a minute ago. And
oh yeah, it's the worst when young people come up to me and they're like, man, I grew up. My mom used to, if I finished my homework, my mom used to let me watch it. I'm like, what? Aren't I your age?
What's can you distill it down to like one or two, lessons, because you're great on the show, but you're a young actor and you're finding your way.
Lessons for actors, you're saying?
Yeah, that you now apply as both an actor and a producer on home economics.
Well, it's no secret that probably anyone who's listening to your show knows that I absolutely love editing and just worship great editors. And what that meant to me when I was younger was I didn't realize, but doing they do edit 4-camera shows, but a lot of the editing, like I did a play a couple of years ago and I'd never been on stage before. And I realized, you're kind of doing post while you're rehearsing it. Like before you know what I mean? Cause you got to cut, you got to cut, you got to tighten certain things. And then I thought, this is a little bit what 70s show was like. Cause you're live in front of an audience. What you see, when the episode is done is pretty similar to what you did that one night you performed it for the audience. And then as I've just gotten more into stuff that's more filmic, and obviously Home Economics is a 1-camera show. It's more like a film. I've just become more and more obsessed with post and the post process and how the audience views certain cuts and certain rhythms as being, because it's invisible. Editing is invisible to people. They don't know what it is. It's funny. You're right. I've done a couple cuts of films. This is for me to learn how to edit. I basically gave bad notes on my first film that I produced and was like, I bought an Avid and just wanted to learn how to, like, what I did wrong basically. But what I became obsessed with is, people know I talk about it a lot on a show like this. It's fine for me to talk about it. And I should say to any directors I'm working with in the future, I don't want to edit things I'm in, but I do have such a respect for it. But it's funny when it's really good, you don't know that it's happening. It's a very invisible art form. So the lesson for me was to understand that and respect it and understand how the thing moves, under the surface.
And it probably speaks to your love of trailers too, is because that's taking so much footage and being able to edit it and condense it and just make it show us the most exciting parts. Like, for example,
but that's all it ever is it's curating.
Yeah.
It's a museum of, you spent all this time amassing all this stuff, and then it's curating just the best of. I'm always our episodes are always a little short. There's like, ABC should be stoked. There's always like time for one more ad during our episodes.
And just think about that. Everybody listening, everybody watching right now, think about that fact that Topher brought up earlier, talking about the original Back to the Future, how it took an editor to convince Robert Zemeckis to leave the Johnny B. Good scene at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. That movie, here's how great the movie is. It's still a great movie without that scene, but it makes it that much better.
Well, the lesson there is that the best thing about editing is I love acting, and acting is a team sport, but editing is really a team sport, because you kind of can't do it without feedback of others, and you lose your way. So it's very, very valuable who you edit with.
That is it's a pretty good life lesson there, kids. Be careful who you edit with. Topher, it's been a pleasure. I could literally talk to you about trailers all day. I know,
man. We just got to do this about have no subject matter and just go.
Just Trailer Park with Mark and Topher. Time Cop. That's another good one. The original Time Cop.
I don't know
trailer.
if I've seen that trailer.
Because it's like old timey Universal, and then all of a sudden, like, Van Damme walks through the portal thing and he confronts his old partner. Oh, dude. Okay, so you got to watch Summer of Sam, and you got to watch Time Cop, the first Time Cop trailer.
Time Cop. All right.
Yeah.
People, my wife's gonna be like, "What are you watching?" Like,
you're like, "Honey, I had a visit with myself on his podcast, and he told me that I
saw me from
this.
the future, right? He told me to watch Time Cop, Right. To understand the
Speaking of great
situation.
podcasts, everybody out there, y'all should also check out The Minor Adventures of Topher Grace, hosted, of course, by Topher Grace. He gets into a lot of fun stuff with a lot of his celebrity pals, and obviously Home Economics back for another season. Check out all of his wonderful library of movies and TV shows. It was
thank you
a
so much
pleasure
for having me, man. I really had
having
fun.
you here.
This was really, really fun.
Your favorite Back to the Future quote can take us out.
Listen, Doc, are you telling me that you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
God, what a pleasure talking to a guy. I mean, you think you know a lot about Back to the Future. I know a lot about it, but Topher Grace, a certified expert in obviously the worlds of acting and editing, but also Back to the Future knowledge. That guy is second to none. So thanks again to Topher. And make sure y'all check out the new season of Home Economics, where he is both an executive producer and a star. Thank you so much. This was a very seminal day in the history of the podcast, and it was great having Topher on. I'm bummed Jacqueline missed it, but I'm glad that now we get that screenshot of just me and me together again at last. Thanks for tuning in to Rotten Tomatoes is Wrong. For Topher Grace, for Brian Perez, for producing Lucy, Jacqueline, Coley, and the whole gang here at Rotten Tomatoes, I am Mark Ellis, saying that if you didn't enjoy this version of the podcast, your kids are going to love it.